Africa, in my view, is the most interesting continent on Earth. Certainly, I'm very biased. For one, I'm an African, and I haven't really traveled much. I've only been through three continents, which is Africa, North America, and Europe. So my data that I'm using is obviously not complete, but I still think Africa is probably the most one of the most interesting continents on Earth today. Now, as many of you already know, I'm a very big advocate of people of all kinds of backgrounds moving to Africa, especially moving to the village. So while the move back to the village really is very rewarding, it's something that I strongly advocate for. The truth is, sometimes things don't work out, especially off camera. So what you might see on camera is probably a slightly cleaned up version of life in the village. So I have a few things that I would say I really regret about this transitioning thing back from the US to the village. But before we unpack all of this, welcome to the village, friends. If you're joining us for the first time, we hope you watch till the end and subscribe if you like it. But for our returning subscribers, I must say thank you and thank you again. I'm just pleased that the majority of folks who are watching us are returning subscribers. So we must be doing something right somewhere. So thank you, folks. We are in Kisumu, Karateng, an amazing village in western part of Kenya. And today my supervisors and I are on cleaning duty. And this is essentially how I was raised. Whenever adults were doing something, we were always part of it, whether it's cooking, cleaning, and all that. And so whether we are in Long Beach or whether we're in Karateng, I always involve my supervisors in whatever it is that I'm doing. So today is cleaning 101 and everybody is participating. So as I mentioned earlier, in the spirit of keeping it 100%, I really want to share some of the things that I truly regret, or some of the things that I don't feel good about when I think about our transition back to Kenya. And just to be clear, again, folks, for us, moving back to Kenya is a process that is going to take multiple years. So we are not fully transitioned yet. We are currently spending way more time in the village, but we go back and forth. A few months we are in the US, a few other months we are in Africa. And so as I talk about the beauty of the village, I just want you to keep in mind that we prefer not to present a very romanticized version that glosses over some of the real challenges that folks faced when they choose to return to the village. So let's hit the main points that we can cover perhaps in the next 10 minutes or so. So point number one, my biggest regrets and one of our worries that I would say is probably one of the main reasons as to why we are not fully transitioned yet is about kids and our concerns about the potential for missed opportunities. Because currently, where we live in Long Beach, our kids go to a very good public school. We live in a wonderful neighborhood, and that's pretty much the reason why we bought the house where we live. The school is really highly ranked, has good student to teacher ratio. Their scores, whether it's math or reading scores, are really high. In fact, I think they're rated like a 9 out of 10. We've got access to school counselors, school psychologists, co-curricular activities. They have free lunch. They have the bus. And all of this is free. And by free, I mean publicly funded. In Kenya, getting exactly what my kids are getting right now would cost an arm and a leg. And that's just kindergarten through high school. And even in college, we still wonder what are some of the potential opportunities that our kids might miss when we eventually transition back. So that's one thing that we still worry about and we have not figured out yet. The second thing that I really regret about moving back to home is the issue of missing systems that work. For example, government services. In America, say if you want a passport, you simply fill in the paperwork as described, go to the office, submit whatever they need, and you get it exactly as you do that. At home, there are many systems that work in ways that would shock you if you are not used to living at home. You have to meet people on the side, pay people, and some things that are just really convoluted. And so even here with my current job, when I applied for it, I knew nobody. My last name meant absolutely nothing. And I'm not saying America has systems that are terrible, or there are many systems that are absolutely abhorrent. In fact, even at work, knowing people can actually get you through quite a bit in America as well. But the idea is an average person still has a decent chance of being successful without necessarily depending on patronage. And so there's lots of systems that works, whether it comes to even legal systems, zoning, and things like that. There are many things that work, but at the same time, remember, America has a lot of things that don't work as well. But when I go home, I really miss systems that work, especially when I run into some things that are really disheartening. Now, the other thing that I regret about is the networks. I've lived most of my adult life in the US. And so it's a given that the majority of my networks are in the US. I've got some really good friends who make my world very happy. And so when I move away back home, there's that chance that I will not be as connected with them. And so even though I'm reestablishing new networks at home, but it's not the same. So I know that that part of me is still yet to be figured out. Some of us worry about the impact on career, especially early career folks who worry that if you move back home, then your career may not progress or you may actually just flatten out completely. Now, earlier on, as an assistant professor when I started 11 years ago, there's no way I would have made that decision to move back home because my career would have really stalled. But thankfully, I'm in a place where I've navigated most of that. I'm a full professor now, and so I don't have to worry about issues of tenure and all that. But yes, sometimes moving home can actually stagnate your career. The good side of it is that there are also many opportunities at home that can just take your career a different pathway and not necessarily stagnate it. Now, my other big regret is the healthcare system. As some of you already know, Kenya is a mixed bag of blessings. We have some really good hospitals, but we also have some health facilities that are just abhorrent in all kinds of ways. Whether you're talking about dental work, vision, general healthcare, service delivery, access to the systems, and even just the regulatory environment. This actually is worse in the village because most likely villages are much further away from the really good hospitals. And so sometimes at home we worry if we ever experience some serious medical crisis, we worry that we may not be able to get help within the time required. And of course, the really good hospitals and healthcare systems are very expensive in Kenya. So the healthcare part is something that I constantly worry about. And then, of course, recreation. Like I say, there's all kinds of ways to access fun and recreation back at home, but it's not the same as what we access in my neighborhood. For example, within about 2 miles, there are about 5 parks, very nice green spaces for kids, for adults. And then we live in Southern California, which is almost like the headquarters of everything entertainment. Whether you talk about concerts, comedy shows, amusement parks. Disney is less than 20 minutes from where we live. We've got Legoland, Universal, all these other things that really just spice life. And what makes it even better, we live in Long Beach at a place which is just about 2 miles from the beach. So while yes, Kisumu has a beach, it's not the same as the beach that we have in Long Beach. And so just some of these outdoor things that spice life are things that I'm less likely to access back in the village. And then you're talking about emergency services. In America, in many places, most folks are assured of getting emergency care when they call 911. So where I live, if I call 911, I have an emergency that requires police, I expect within a few minutes there'll be cops showing up to intervene. If it is a medical emergency, there's somebody who's going to show up with an ambulance. It might cost an arm and a leg, but at least somebody will show up. In the village, since we are often much further away from, say, police stations or good hospitals, getting emergency care can be complicated. And that's why, for me, I'm actually thinking when I win the lottery, I think I'm going to build a hospital in the village. And of course, I'll use part of that lottery money to build a very good public school, build very good universities, because these are things we talk about. Everybody knows we should be doing them, but we know that the local politicians are not going to do them. So at some point, as a diasporan, I think we just have to figure out a way to do them. Right now, I don't have a plan besides just winning lottery, but I know one way or the other, I need to build a proper school, proper hospitals, and proper universities that can serve especially folks that live in the village. So Access to emergency services is something that we worry about because it's one thing that you almost immediately lose as soon as you transition back to the village. Now, then you have other cost of things like gas. Interesting enough, America seems to have very cheap gas. And I'm not talking California. I'm talking about places like maybe Alabama, South Carolina, and things like that. Their gas is super cheap. When you come to Kenya, you realize the cost of gas is very high. And besides the cost, in Kenya, you don't simply just pull over to a random gas station and get gas because most likely you're going to find dirty fuel or something that I would basically describe in French. It's like somebody buying a la ponger, essentially, not even gas, because they end up mixing it with all kinds of things that will end up damaging your engine. And so our gas is expensive, but you also have to be careful where you're buying it. I don't think I've ever had to worry about the type of gas that I put in my car in America. And definitely it helps that gas is relatively affordable in the US. Now, that brings me to the issue of roads. Kenya has really good roads comparatively, but in the village, that is less true. So we get comfortable with the kinds of roads we have in the US. So when you get home, it's more like a lot of off-roading, which in some ways I also like. I really enjoy off-roading, but when off-roading is your reality every day, it takes a different dimension. And then, of course, the last one is something I don't worry about, but I know my parents worried about, is the issue of people feeling that I would be a failure by coming back home. There's a very strong perception that people who move to the village have failed in America, and therefore they are going back home to reset. So I hope you can connect with this. Then I'll see you in the next. Thank you.